We have one of those stories today that I'm surprised that others in the sort of clean food, carnivore, ketogenic diet spaces aren't really talking about. If you've been watching me for a while, you know that I will tell you that the number one thing you can do to improve your health is to stop eating processed foods, to keep it to a bare minimum. If you don't agree with me on keeping your carbs to near zero or absolute zero, I would hope at the very least we can agree that processed foods are something you should avoid, pretty much at all costs. And part of the reason for avoiding processed foods isn't because it's frozen or in a can or anything. It's all the chemicals and preservatives that are put into those foods. They have a detrimental impact on your body. Many studies out there show that the various chemicals in there can accumulate in your body, cause long-term harm, and in general aren't that good for you. Not to mention the fact that they are vehicles for seed oils, they're vehicles for heavy metals that are in the food, they're foods that have been designed to be hyper-palatable, calorie-dense, and just in general wreck your metabolism. That shouldn't be anything anybody disputes. But we now have news that the FDA is going to double down on one of the most controversial food ingredients in all processed foods. That they are basically going to reapprove the ingredient titanium dioxide for use in foods. An ingredient that, by the way, that they have gone after companies for putting into sunscreen, which is a topical, goes on your skin. The same agency seems to think it's okay to put it in food, but not in sunscreen. If you can understand the logic of that, let me know in the comments why they would do that, aside from obviously the influence of the processed food manufacturing giant companies who do in fact donate to the FDA and to the USDA and to the other regulatory agencies. It's a concept called regulatory capture. You should look that up sometime. It'll answer a lot of your questions as to why these organizations have such a huge influence on organizations within the U.S. government and other governments that are not elected by the people. But our story comes from CSPInet.org, and we get this headline: Public health groups urge FDA to cancel approval of titanium dioxide in food. Yes, titanium dioxide, and the article comes with a picture of a couple of donuts, and titanium dioxide is often used in like food colorings and other things to make them look, not to really make them pop. So the more artificially colored the food you're eating is, the more likely it has titanium dioxide or something similar in it. Go, as a general rule, always, if you're going to buy something that is even semi-processed, read the label. If it's in a package, read the label. This includes the meat in the meat department, okay? Because you will sometimes find that some meats are brined in broth, but they never tell you what's in the broth. So I should have some questions for you there. But always read the label so you know what it is you're buying and what you're going to be putting into your body. Again, that should not be a controversial statement, but in our time, that seems to be. Let's take a look at what they actually have to say here, because it gives you a couple of interesting little details for our discussion. So from the article, quote, a coalition of 5 public health advocacy organizations, the Environmental Working Group, which was the EWG, the Environmental Defense Fund, Center for Science and the Public Interest, Center for Food Safety, and Center for Environment and Health, petitioned the Food and Drug Administration to revoke its approval to use the harmful color additive titanium dioxide in food. Nanoparticles are the chemical likely to accumulate where they may harm the immune and nervous systems. Titanium dioxide is found in potentially thousands of foods marketed to children. Remember what I said about them being really colorful foods? Again, processed foods marketed to kids often are very colorful and bright colored. Think breakfast cereals and things. A chemical that builds up in the body and could harm the immune and nervous system should not be in candies and treats marketed to children, said Melanie Benish, Vice President of Governmental Affairs at the Environmental Working Group. The Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Act does not require the FDA to regularly reassess the risks of chemicals it has approved for use in food, so decades may pass without agency reassessment of the safety of chemicals like titanium dioxide. The FDA approved titanium dioxide for use in food in 1966 and last reviewed its safety in food in 1973, when it concluded it was safe. But the FDA approval was based on the belief that titanium dioxide does not accumulate in the body. The most recent science shows that titanium dioxide nanoparticles can build up in the body. End quote. So their initial decision was based on faulty science. We now know better through just basic scientific research that these nanoparticles of, frankly, of a heavy metal do in fact accumulate in the body. And what metabolic effects do they have? Well, we're not exactly sure, but we can tell you right now that this stuff is not good. We know that it can undermine the immune system. That's as much that we do know, and it does have negative effects on the body's nervous system. And one of the questions I always have about these sort of heavy metals and these other things is, what kind of metabolic effects do they have? Do they play a role in your body's metabolism or lack thereof of fat, in the accumulation of body fat? That is a question I've always had about this, because there are some of us who, before we went to like zero carb or keto, we had the weird experience where if we just counted calories, we would still gain weight if we ate otherwise a low-calorie version of the standard American diet. And it didn't exactly make sense. And now, of course, in hindsight, we know that's because there's a heck of a lot more to body fat storage, weight loss, weight maintenance than merely calories in, calories out. The calories in, calories out has largely been debunked, or at least has had its sort of place of primacy as the ultimate measure of if you're going to gain weight or not taken away from it. Calories in, calories out is largely junk science at this point, or at the very least, highly suspect. But what role do these artificial food additives play in body composition and body fat storage? The answer is, unfortunately, we don't really know the answer to that, at least so far. It's been my assessment, like my personal opinion, that in general, I would suspect that the linoleic acids like omega-6 linoleic acids from seed oils and plant oils play a negative role in body fat composition or body fat storage as well. And that is one of those things that needs more study, but unfortunately, good luck getting the FDA, any regulatory agency, or anybody in the food system to study some of the most profitable, widely sold products in the food system to find out if they're actually safe or not. And the same goes with this. Titanium dioxide is banned overseas in a lot of places because of the nervous system and immune system negative impacts it has. And you have to wonder, will that happen here? I'm skeptical, but maybe we can do something about it by spreading awareness of this. Those of you who are better equipped to really dive into the science of this should spend time really arguing against this and arguing against processed foods. And the best way you can argue against processed foods, or at least fight the influence of processed foods in your own life, is to get to as low of a processed amount of food in your diet as possible. Cook your own foods. Go out to eat less often. And if you really want a sweet treat, if you do not agree with me on carbohydrates, zero carb and keto and all those things, but you do agree that processed foods are bad, so you still eat carbs and sweet things, at the very least, learn to make those things yourself. There's no harm in learning how to cook things for yourself. And keep the outside treats to a rare, occasional thing. And then it'll probably be you'll mitigate the impact of these on your system. But just remember, the treat that you make at home is probably not as hyperpalatable as the treats that you buy that are processed, because those things were engineered to be addictive. I'll leave you with that. Let me know what you think of this in the comments, please. Are you surprised that the FDA is going to double down on this while also telling sunscreen makers they can't put this stuff in sunscreen? If you have an idea why that is, aside from a regulatory capture, let me know in the comments, please. And like and subscribe if you haven't. It certainly does help. As does sharing this on social media. That helps a lot too. I'm Anthony Stine, the Practical Carnivore. Thanks for tuning in.